Lynne McTaggart, Unraveling the New Science, Zero Point Field, Quantum Physics, and a Purposeful Life. Join us for an incredible conversation with Lynne McTaggart as she takes us on a journey through the new science, where quantum fields, the zero point field, and the mysteries of time converge. Discover how this knowledge can transform your life, unlocking your innate potential and leading you to a more purposeful existence. Prepare to have your perception of reality redefined. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Let me share a little bit about this incredible guest that we have on the show today. Lynne McTaggart is an award-winning journalist and best-selling author known as a metaphysical rock star and a leading voice in the new science. She's celebrated for her groundbreaking work on consciousness, intention, and the power of group thought. Her books have been translated into numerous languages, and her work has been featured in films. She's even inspired a character in Dan Brown's novel. I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage today, Miss Lynne McTaggart. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you.
It's such an honor to have you here, Lynne, on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I've been excited to have a conversation with you because you're doing such incredible work globally. So let's start by sharing a little bit about yourself so the audience can get to know you more.
Thank you, April. Well, I got hijacked into this work. I never expected to do any of this. If you wanted to ask me when I just got out of university and was just starting work, what are you going to be in your life? I would have said an investigative reporter. My plan was to do journalism and tough cutting edge journalism where I would put bad guys in jail. And in fact, that is what I was doing in my 20s. My first big story was about baby brokers, lawyers who were engaged in international adoption rackets. And I got into that by posing as an unwed mother. This was back when I was 23. And later as an adoptive parent, would-be adoptive parent. And through that, I found and broke a number of international baby selling rings where women who were pregnant were being sent over from Germany to New York because abortion was illegal at the time in Germany. Women who were being housed in the Caribbean, and much, much more. And all of these complex kind of baby selling schemes. So that became my first book. And I thought that was going to be my life, putting bad guys in jail. And when I was in my early 30s, I started a newsletter, then a newsletter, now a magazine, with my husband, who's also a journalist, called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And at the time, we were really interested in what works and what doesn't work in conventional and alternative medicine, mainly what doesn't work in conventional medicine. So that was our investigative reporting, is digging out what doesn't work and what's dangerous and unproven, and then looking at the science of what is workable and effective in alternative medicine. Now, in the course of doing that, I kept coming across very good studies of things like acupuncture, spiritual healing, and much more. And I kept thinking to myself, well, hold on. If you can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, well, that undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I wanted to find out why this could be so. I wondered whether or not there was such a thing as human energy fields. So I persuaded my publisher to let me go on a journey without a compass. I did not know what I was looking for, but I thought I'll start with some frontier scientists doing work in consciousness research, um, physicists, biologists, etc., and see if they can tell me why. And what I didn't expect was what I found. Each one of these scientists were coming up with experimental evidence demonstrating that we're on the brink of a completely new science, a new understanding of the world. And what they were doing in their own experimental data, and by the way, scientists talk in math, they talk in code, and they also have a hard time translating that into normal everyday English. They also don't like to speculate beyond what they've experienced or experimented with in their laboratory. So I soon realized, really with some alarm, that that job of decoding quantum physics, and I did not take physics in high school, let alone at university, and also bringing this all together was going to be left to me. So eventually I published this book called The Field, which was all about us being part of a giant quantum energy field and much more. And what it demonstrated was a science beyond the Newtonian science we've all grown up with, that we have a new scientific story in the making. And we're not these separate, discrete entities, well-behaved entities operating according to fixed laws in time and space, as Isaac Newton described more than 300 years ago. We are vibrating packets of energy, trading energy with other things, and this giant energy field of which we're part. So there was some unfinished business, though, which was this whole idea that thoughts are not only things, but things that affect other things. So the hard-nosed journalist in me wanted to know how far we can take it. And so that's when I decided to test this, both by writing a book called The Intention Experiment, which summarized all of the copious evidence about the power of thoughts to affect things out there, but also to invite my readers to take part in ongoing experiments. I wanted to know how far we could take this. Are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? Can we fly with our thoughts? Are we talking about just a tiny shift of a quantum particle? So that became the Intention Experiment. And I had a lot of readers at the time. The field was in 30 languages. And I also knew all of these scientists working in consciousness research in prestigious universities like Princeton, University of Arizona, University of California, Penn State, and so forth. And so I thought, well, if I just bring them together every so often, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. So that's what I did with the Intention Experiment. And I've been hijacked ever since, working on consciousness research, working on the power of intention. And that is the direction my life has taken now with 4 books. I'm working on a 5th in this area. And 41 intention experiments later, and many small and large group, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them now around the world.
Lynn, when you say hijacked, it makes a lot of sense to me, because it's like the saying, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unknow that. And you become so passionate about just wanting the whole world to know. And that's exactly what you're doing. I love listening to your story, because I smile the whole way through, because it reminds me so much of myself and my own journey. I went into law enforcement. I've always had this investigative nature, such as yourself, wanting to put the bad guys away. And there's something about that where you realize that you can make a bigger impact. Once you start realizing that all of the things that we do, the way that we are, is a lot of how our environment is. And then it's really the internal aspect of ourselves that creates the chaos, right? I remember learning about the broken window theory early on in my career and finding out that our environment has a big impact about the crime rates. And so you're doing similar work where you're seeing what crime rate does and doesn't do when it comes to people going within and having that intention. And so I think it's just fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you find you can have a bigger impact. And that's one of the amazing things with the intention experiment. We've run 41 to date since 2007. Everything from trying to make seeds grow faster, to purifying water with our thoughts, to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas. We've done 41 of them to date. And with we have a giant intention experiment coming up I'll talk about later. We're going to focus on a violent place in America, not to be disclosed yet. And we've even healed someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. Of those 41, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. Now, just to put that into context, there is no pharmaceutical drug out there with that kind of consistent, positive track record. And we've done maybe about 10, 11 peace intention experiments. Every single one has shown a measurable effect. So that was interesting to me. We could do that with our thoughts, but it isn't the point of the story. I mean, the point of the story was what was happening to the participants. And that was the thing that started blowing my mind. Because back in 2008, with our first peace intention experiment, which was to lower violence in Sri Lanka, which at the time was going through a 25-year civil war. So we focused on certain areas of Sri Lanka. And it was amazing. Within 6 months of our experiment, this 25-year intractable war, the government wasn't winning, the rebels weren't winning, the rebels had choked off the North. And within a few months of our experiment, the government was able to reclaim the North. And with a few months after that, that 25-year war was over. Now, was that us? Short answer, who knows? There's a lot of variables when you're dealing with a war, everything from the weather to so many other things. However, as I said, when you start seeing the same effect over and over and over again, which we've done in all 11 peace intention experiments, it starts getting really interesting. But as I say, that wasn't the point of the story. The point of the story was what happened to the participants. From 2008, I started surveying everybody who takes part in an intention experiment, particularly the peace intention experiments. And what we discovered, I was just asking questions. How was that for you? Because I wanted to find out, were they all able to get onto the internet? We were running these early experiments from my own website. So I wanted to check on their ability to get on, how they felt during it, a few things like that. But that's not all. What I ended up coming back to me was thousands of answers saying, I felt like I was part of a higher network. I was crying uncontrollably. I was sobbing. I had goosebumps up and down my arms. I felt like I was in the tractor beam in Star Trek, and so much more. Even more than that, they started saying things like, I made up with my estranged partner or children or parent. I'm getting along so much better with my neighbor. We used to fight all the time. We're now best friends, or my boss or my coworkers. And about half always said it with each survey say about half, I feel more love for everyone I come into contact with.
Mm.
And about a third each time report great improvements or total healings of some sort of health condition. So my mind was completely blown, and all of this eclipsed what was going on in terms of the target. Yeah, our thoughts are things that affect other things, but even more importantly, when we focus on an altruistic intention of that, our life completely transforms. So that was the thing that started interesting me, is what is going on with the participants.
Mm. It's absolutely fascinating when we open ourselves up and that heart center. I would love for you to explain a little bit about how you guide your participants in the intention.
Well, it would take about a couple of hours to explain all of the things that I teach people about intention, and I do them in courses. But basically, I have people all thinking the same thought at the same time. I make those thoughts very, very specific. I have people um, breathing together in training and really thinking of the same thought and sending it out at the same time with a number of the techniques that I use. It helps minds entrain, meaning they're all operating in synchrony. Their brain waves are similar, if not identical. And that's what we focus on achieving. But what's really interesting is what's going on in their bodies. So I was mystified about how people could start feeling this much love for everyone they come into contact with. And even more, what happened in a Middle East experiment I did a few years ago. So this time I was able to use special equipment, a special studio where we could stick cameras in 9 different locations. So we stuck a camera in a conference room in 8 different Arab cities. And the 9th camera we put in an auditorium full of Israeli Jews. So we had Arabs and Israelis, Arabs from Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Oman and Kuwait, et cetera, and then in Tunisia. Then we had an audience in Jerusalem. So we brought them all together to do an intention for a portion of the old city in Jerusalem, which was suffering a lot of violence. And I had to broker the whole thing. Both sides were not talking to each other. And they were really regarding the other side with this suspicion. They're hated enemies. They've been brought up to hate each other. So we did this intention. And because of this special equipment, I could speak to them, and each audience in each location could speak back to me and the other participants. And we also broadcast this over the internet as well via my YouTube channel. So we did all of this, and then I asked them, so how was that for you? And I was flabbergasted when the Arabs started saying to the Jews, your God is my God. And the Jews started saying to the Arabs, we love you, brothers and sisters. And it was this big love fest of everybody sending love back and forth. I had seen that before when I did an experiment on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I invited Arabs and Americans to come together and do this intention for 2 provinces in southern Afghanistan. And while we had this unprecedented lowering of violence in those 2 provinces compared to everywhere else, that was cool, but not the point of the story. The point of the story was what was going on in my instant messaging and Facebook pages, where both sides, Arabs and Americans, were all sending love to each other. Your God is my God, the whole thing. So I was amazed by these kinds of results. And I started talking to Dacher Keltner, who is a psychologist at the University of California. And I was interested because he told me about this study he and his graduate student had done, where they got student volunteers and put them into 2 groups. One group was shown pictures of the world's victims, like starving children. The other group was shown pictures designed to elicit pride, pictures of the Berkeley campus where they were attending, pictures of the California football team, the Berkeley football team, beating their nearest rivals, Stanford University's football team, other pictures like that. Afterward, Keltner and his grad student showed them, each group, different photos. And group one, who'd seen the world's victims, started identifying with people not like them. People, if they were Democrats, they were also feeling connected to Republicans, and homeless and prisoners and all kinds of different people. The other, they began feeling closer to the other too. Whereas the other students who had been shown pictures designed to elicit pride in who they were felt closest to the people they would become: doctors, lawyers, financiers, fellow students. So I started realizing, and after talking with Keltner, realized what goes on when we do something altruistic, even seeing pictures of starving children. It opens up the heart. It affects the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve in the body. It starts at the neck, winds its way through all of the major organs of the body, and controls our sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, and also the rest and digest response. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. But there's a third layer to this, which is the connection and safety. And when we feel and do something altruistic, it opens up that connection and safety part of the vagus nerve, and it becomes like a love nerve. It releases oxytocin, the love hormone. We feel more love for everybody, more love for humanity. And so that is what's going on. And I started seeing this as really a gateway to greater love and greater connection between people. And that is really what I've been focusing on. And also focusing on with small groups, which I started back in 2008, which I call Power of Eight groups.
Yes, and you have a book on the power of eight. Is that correct?
I do. I
Yes.
wrote that 10 years after I started experimenting with Power of Eight groups, because when I first did this back in 2008, I was kicking this around with my husband, also a great journalist, and my team. And I said, I'd like to shrink down what's going on with these intention experiments into a workshop setting, but I'm not sure what to do. I don't know. Maybe I'll just put people in a small group of 8 or so and have them send intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband is a great headline writer, and he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's how the name got started. We didn't expect anything in this workshop. It was in Chicago. I put people into groups of 8. I told them to send intention, get somebody to volunteer in the group with a health challenge, send intention to that person. And I figured it would be a nice relaxing effect, like getting your back rubbed, just massage for a few minutes. So we did that on the Saturday, and on the Sunday, I asked them all to come back, and I had the people who had been the targets come up to the stage and tell us what happened. And again, I expected it would be a little like getting a facial or something like that. And that's not what it was. There had been a woman who was really limping badly because she had terrible arthritis walk in normally that day. And somebody else with terrible depression who said, it feels lifted today. And somebody else with bad digestion, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, who said, my gut feels normal today for the first time in years. And most amazingly, somebody else with cataracts who said, my eyes are 80% better. So I was completely blown away by this, and actually a little terrified by it because, in my mind, I'm an investigative reporter. I'm not a healer. I'm not showing people how to heal. But I kept trying it in all of the workshops in all the countries I visited, and then started doing it in a little class and started looking into why we're getting these amazing healing effects. And I concluded, and that's why it took me so long to get up the courage to write The Power of Eight, the book, because I needed to understand, why is this working? And I think there are several pieces of this. And the first is intention works. Thoughts are things that affect other things, and targeted intention in a group magnifies that effect. That's one. Number two, groups have an effect. You know, psychologists like the French psychologist Emile Durkheim first came up with this whole idea of groups creating collective effervescence. So there was that. There is the altruism piece. Altruism is like a bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people, no matter how small, taking out your neighbor's garbage, for instance. People who do things for other people live longer, healthier, happier lives. It's absolutely indisputable. The science is clear about it. So there's altruism and being of service. I mean, it's so good for you. It's so healthy for you. In fact, there's an amazing study that really compared, that really said it to me, of one group. They categorized as pleasure seekers, people who had all the money they wanted, who went on a lot of vacations, who ate the finest food, drank the finest wine. They figured that these people, being really happy and pleasure seekers, would have great immune systems, said the scientists. But when they measured them, they found that they were terrible. Then they looked at another group who were not as affluent, not as pleasure seeking, but were living a life of service. And when they looked at their immune system markers, they found that they were robust. These people were going to live forever. The others were probably going to die of any one of a number of degenerative diseases. They were going to drop like flies. So that really demonstrated it to me and moved the whole idea, the consciousness around manifestation beyond I want, I get, which is what it is in many instances, to I want for you, and then I get to. And that is what part of what I teach too. And the great thing about a Power of Eight group is you're intending for other people 7/8 of the time. And I find that it almost doesn't matter. The people who are sending the intention get their heart's desires too. And it's fascinating. So there was the altruism piece, but there's one more piece that's really important. And that is, and I think this is the big secret sauce, and that is the power of oneness. So after a while, after some years, I decided, let's find out what's going on in the brains of Power of Eight groups. So I was fortunate enough to be approached by Life University, who liked my Power of Eight work, and they decided to put a team of neuroscientists at my disposal. So we set up a very simple experiment. We got together 7 groups of student volunteers, and we put an EEG cap on one member of each group and read their brainwaves while they were doing Power of Eight intention for one member of the group and the group as a whole. So we expected those brainwave signatures to look just like those of meditation. And we were really astonished to find that they looked nothing like meditation. Nothing like them. A meditation causes an increase in slower brain waves, alpha waves, delta waves, the brainwave signatures of somebody in light dreaming or deep sleep. Ours were nothing like that. The brainwaves were actually dialing down. They were turning off, particularly the brain waves located in the brain activity, located in the parietal lobes. They sit back here. They help us determine what is me and not me. They help us navigate through space. And also the temporal lobes, which perform somewhat similar function. They were dialed way down. And the right frontal lobes, the part of the brain involved with worry, doubt, negativity, also dialed way down. And a lot of other brain waves dialed way down. And what this indicated, and what it was almost identical to, were the brainwave signatures recorded by Dr. Andrew Newberg, then a neuroscientist affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania, who did extensive studies on brain activity of Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer. These were not brainwave signatures, my groups, my students, that were like meditation. These were brainwave signatures identical to people in a state of ecstatic oneness. And that, I think, is the big piece here. That is the secret sauce. We don't get to experience oneness in our lives. Even though we are all one, we talk about we're all one, we don't live life like that. We live life in a kind of desperate sense of separation. But here in Power of Eight groups, we do. We feel visceral connection with each other. People talk about all of those things about energy and crying uncontrollably and all of that stuff that they talked about in the intention experiments. And in that state of oneness, I think it's a gateway to the miraculous.
It definitely is. And it sounds to me like this is certainly what you've been striving for all along, is to have people, with the same thoughts, the same brain waves, excuse me, and in order to become one, right? And the things that happen because of that are, like you said, miraculous. It's the things that happen afterwards. It's the things that happen and how somebody's life is completely transformed because they have given love and life and to another. And I think that that is so beautiful. Now, when you talk about the new science, you've done a lot of research. You've had the capacity to be able to have scientists at your disposal, right? To be able to pick up on all of the readings. And when we talk about 0-point field and quantum physics, how does that come into play?
Okay, well, let me define what the 0-point field is. So the 0-point field is created like this. First of all, we have to understand we are vibrating packets of energy, lots of different energy. We are electromagnetic. We have light energy beaming out of the body, a thing called biophoton emissions, tiny currents of light. We have sound waves coming out of every cell, every pore. We have all kinds of waves coming out, and we have quantum waves too. Now, we're all made up of subatomic particles. And when we talk about a particle is not a particle, as in a billiard ball or a marble. A particle is a vibrating packet of energy, trading energy with other subatomic particles. Think of a microscopic game of tennis, back and forth, back and forth. And in this little game, think of the ball as an energy trade. A virtual particle gets created. That's the ball. Now it vanishes in less than the blink of an eye, but it creates energy. Not a lot of energy if it's just one tiny little tennis game. But when you factor all the tennis games being played with all the things in all the world, you come up with an unfathomable amount of energy just sitting out there in empty space. And that gives rise to this giant energy field called the 0-point field. Now, if you and I were sitting across from each other, let's say a yard apart, the energy between us would be enough to boil all the oceans in the world. That's how much energy, and that's how much energy density the 0 point field has in it. So that's the case, but we also know that there are several implications of this giant energy field of which we're a part. Because remember, our subatomic particles are doing this little energy dance too. Now, there's two really important factors. Number one, subatomic particles, once they bump into each other, they take on their information. And a subatomic particle, also a wave, has a near infinite capacity to store information. So, for instance, if the Library of Congress were a subatomic wave, and remember the Library of Congress has every book in English in the world there. If it were a subatomic wave, it could fit on something the size of a sugar cube. That's how energy dense, how much information a subatomic particle wave can hold. So it's a repository of information, this 0 point field that's sitting out there in empty space of which we're a part. But it also is a vehicle by which we can access information beyond our senses, because we know people can do intention. We know there's plenty of evidence that people can pick up information via remote viewing beyond their immediate senses. We know people pick up information by extrasensory perception or precognition. They can forecast things and much, much more. And we now know people can heal via these groups, even individually. But I see it particularly, it gets supersized in groups. So the 0 point field is a mechanism by which we can understand our ability to access information beyond our senses.
Mm. It's absolutely fascinating. And you know what I love about that is it makes me have a better understanding of what oneness truly is, that of which we cannot see. It just simplifies it when we start learning and understanding the science behind it. And so let's share a little bit with the audience about the new science program that you have and how you guide your audience into explaining what this is and how it can have a greater effect on their personal life.
Okay, thank you. So I did a course which is bite-sized chunks of the new science with 8 parts, because I felt that people needed this grounding and were really yearning for it. So I recorded different aspects of it, things about the 0 point field, things about the new biology, what epigenetics is and how it changes everything, how the new biology demonstrates that we're not built from inside out, from our genes to our cells, etc. We're built from outside in, that we are, and our cells and our genes are exquisitely sensitive to outside influences. In fact, a quartet of atoms sit above every gene, and they are sensitive to everything from the outside: the air we breathe, the food we eat, the friends we have, the sum total of how we live our lives. They affect this little quartet of atoms, and they in turn determine whether or not to turn on genes. So genes are like a piano sitting there waiting to be played. And what starts the process of playing is the environment. So I talk about that. I talk about the fact that we are beings of light, and that this light energy appears to be related to our ability to do intention. I talk about the idea that our thoughts are not housed in our brain. The brain is not the repository of information, but our brain is much more like an antenna receiver, that we are picking up information from the field and we are broadcasting to the field. And I explained how that was discovered in the 1960s by a neuroscientist called Dr. Carl Pribram. And I talk about how cells operate in a very, very different way, and the power of intention, why intention works, all the different reasons why we can affect things. Probably my favorite of the modules is time, because we are imbued with the idea that time is sequential from cradle to grave. But every quantum physicist worth his salt knows there is no such thing as sequential time. That's a human construct. Life is much more like one big smeared out now. We don't experience that because we've been taught to create little bite-sized chunks of time. But the way it's been demonstrated that these quantum physicists are correct are in many experiments that I talk about. And one of my favorite is the remote viewing work that was done by Princeton University with under the direction of the then dean of engineering, the late Robert John, and his partner, the psychologist, the late Brenda Dunn. Now, those two created a very systematic and rigorous program studying remote viewing, the ability to see beyond your senses. And what they did was they would set it up so that they'd have a remote viewer in the lab, and these were ordinary people, not special gifted psychics. And then they would have a traveling partner. So the pair would work together. This is how it would happen. The remote viewer, the traveling partner, would pick up an envelope. It would tell him where to go. He would not tell his remote viewing partner where he was going. It would be anywhere from around the corner to 2,000 miles away. He'd have to go to that location and then observe it, be there. Once he got there, his remote viewing partner would have to draw and describe where he thought his partner was in great detail. Like if he was standing in front of a train station, he would have to draw and describe the train station, the trains, the waiting room, etc. So without knowing where his partner was. But in 2/3 of the cases, what they started doing was doing this out of time. So they would have the traveling partner wait and have his remote viewer draw and describe where his partner was going to go before the traveling partner even selected his envelope. And they were breathtakingly accurate, even though they were out of time, even though this was a total prediction without the partner, the traveling partner, even knowing where he was going. They were breathtakingly accurate, demonstrating, once again, time is one big smeared out now. And there are so many other experiments like that. And I certainly witness it in some of the work that I do, where I do intention out of time, retro intention, and it has a powerful effect on the energy of past situations. So there are many, many elements to the new science that I want people to have full grounding in. Also, I look at whether Darwin was right or not. Were we meant to be so competitively individual? And the big answer is no. We were meant to belong, to connect, to be part of something communal and larger. And that also forms my work. And I talk about that a lot in this course too.
Lynn, it's easy to fall in love with everything you're doing and you. And I would venture to say I feel everyone should have this information and learn it and know it and understand. And it sounds to me like you guide your audience into truly seeing it, and it creates that belief system, that knowing that this is what we are capable of as human beings and how powerful we truly are. Now, Lynne, I would love to know, you have been able to access all of this information and knowing yourself. How has that changed how you live life? What is your daily lifestyle like?
My daily lifestyle is one of greater belief in things and listening to that wise group upstairs who kind of helped me steer toward my destiny. And I have seen many times some of the decisions I've been asked to make in my life that seemed calamitous at the time turned out to be the best thing that ever happened. So I have learned to trust the process, just as I tell people to trust the process, and also to be very intentional in my life, to be very focused on what I would like to have happen. And so I think that's changed me. It's also, of course, changed the stories that I tell and the work that I do. Aside from writing about this, aside from teaching it, I also try to help people live with the power of intention. And that's why I focus on creating Power of Eight groups, because I've seen with my own eyes that we've had 3 people get up out of their wheelchairs doing Power of Eight groups, each one the first time they ever did it. One was paralyzed from the neck down. Somebody else had multiple sclerosis. Somebody else could barely walk, even with crutches, and threw her crutches away. And I've seen that so many more times with people. I knew a woman who took a course of mine, was going blind. The doctors couldn't do anything for her retinal damage in both eyes. She couldn't even drive her car anymore. And her group did an intention for her, and she's got 20/20 vision now. We've had people with genetic illnesses. I had a woman who was due for a liver transplant, do one Power of Eight group, and her liver and spleen, which were swollen and scarred, etc., returned to normal. And her doctor, she has notes from 2 doctors officially saying your liver and spleen are normal. And on and on and on. People who were deaf regaining their hearing, people who had terrible arthritis get over it, and also people achieving things in their lives, whether it is finding loved ones, whether it is finding a new job or career, or fixing their finances, moving house, finding a new life purpose. I've seen it over and over again, now tens of thousands of times. So has that changed me? Yeah. I now see, probably my whole trajectory was one of being really a campaigner to fix the wrongs of the world. And now I feel like maybe this is something that's been plunked in my lap to help heal the world. And I guess that's the job I have now.
That's a beautiful job. And my one of my questions would be, when you get people together, and they're intentionally healing or sending energy towards another person, does it matter if that other person who's receiving has a belief or a desire to want to heal? Does it matter how they feel or not?
Well, interestingly, you would think belief is important, and it is. However, it's not strictly necessary, and I know this from one time when a husband and wife team. He was the step parent to a 15-year-old boy called Luke. Now, Luke broke up with his first serious girlfriend. He was 15 at the time, and in a fit of adolescent angst, he threw himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. Now, Luke broke everything in his body. He had brain damage, he had nerve damage, and the doctors didn't even think he was going to live. So the stepfather, Michael, wrote to me and said, is there anything you can do? Can you get your groups to do intentions for Luke? And so I mobilized a course I was running at the time called the Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, where I put people, I teach them live and interactively, and then I put people into groups for a whole year. So I had all of these groups together, Power of Eight groups, and I asked them all to hold intentions for Luke on successive Sundays, while the stepfather kept a running commentary of what was going on with Luke. And shortly after every time we did an intention, he had this giant leap in improvement. So we saw that, and ultimately Luke got out of the hospital in record time, and he's now a normal, I guess he's now about 21, normal kid. And I met up with the step parents a few years later. They showed me pictures of this healthy, normal boy. But that is not the point of the story. The point of the story is that the mother and father, of course, fervently believed in the power of intention. But like any teenager, Luke didn't believe a word of it. He thought his parents' belief in the power of intention was pretty stupid. So we saw how well it worked, even with somebody who didn't believe one word of it. And I've seen that in other cases too. Belief certainly helps, but is not an absolutely essential part.
Mm, so powerful. I just absolutely love everything that you're doing. Let's share with the audience now. What are you most excited about creating, Lynn?
Thank you. Well, I have several things going on. One of the first is my course. We're releasing my course again, The New Science, which is my bite-sized bits of new science that everybody can understand. And I've got pretty pictures and charts and all kinds of things for people to swallow this very easily. So it's a nice sugar pill of what is ordinarily very complicated. And soon after, I'm going to be launching my once a year Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, which is my course where I provide the attendees with 10 live and interactive sessions, first 6, and then we have catch up clinics throughout the year. And then I put you right after the 6, I put you into your own Power of Eight group in your time zone. And your job is to meet with them every week throughout the year, just on Zoom for an hour. And we have extraordinary effects after people continue to meet week on week on week. They're the people who heal their lives and help the rest of their groups to heal. So that's coming up. We'll be announcing that in a few months. And in February, right after the inauguration of our next president, whoever he's going to be or she is going to be, I'm running a giant intention experiment. And it's going to be about lowering violence in a particular area that I'll announce just at the time. So it's going to be live, and we're going to have participants from all over the world in lots of different languages. So I really encourage everyone to take part in that. You can find out about it and just about everything else I'm doing, all of the free tools I offer as well, the community site, etc., by coming on to my website, lynnmctaggart.com.
Ah, that's incredible. And yes, I want to make sure everyone knows where to find you. So it's been displayed on the screen as we've been speaking for those of you watching. And for those of you listening in, again, www.lynnmctaggart.com. You can find that also in the description below. Now, Lynn, I think that it's just fascinating all the things you're doing. So people can work directly with you through your programs. They can read your fascinating books. You're working on book 5 right now. And also through Gaia Incorporation, right? Gaia TV, where you have done a lot with them. You've done documentaries, and this next project is with Gaia. Is that correct?
It is, and Gaia are doing a 2-part documentary of my work and of course this intention experiment. So we've been working really closely over the last few months.
So you are easily found throughout the globe, aren't you? So I just love what you're doing. Thank you so much for being this incredible light in the world. and bringing us all to a higher evolution. And I think that that is one of my greatest desires, is to help us all evolve to our greatest capacity. And you are one of the ones at the forefront of this. So, Lynne, it has been fascinating having you on the Wellness Driven Life Show. Thank you so much. We are truly honored.
It's been my pleasure, April. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for our audience, because without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So goodbye for now, and we will see you next time.